The galaxy had long laughed at humanity. For centuries, humans had been catalogued as inconsequential, a minor species with small ships, primitive technology, and colonies scattered across unremarkable sectors. Empires that spanned entire star clusters dismissed them as irrelevant. Patrol fleets would cross human space without concern. Diplomatic councils barely acknowledged human delegations, and intelligence agencies often wrote them off as a curiosity rather than a threat. Humanity was patient, they said. Patience meant weakness, submission, and a lack of ambition. And humanity endured, quietly. For centuries, they had watched every skirmish, every patrol route. Every empire's patterns were logged meticulously. Trade routes, communication frequencies, fleet compositions, and battle doctrines were catalogued with near-obsessive precision. The humans had learned to observe without being observed, to endure without resistance, and to survive without attracting attention. In the outer Cathari cluster, a human freighter, the Celestial Dawn, drifted silently through hyperspace. It was a modest vessel, unassuming in size and design, but every inch of it had been refined over decades of human ingenuity and patient adaptation. Sensors continuously swept the sector, recording every anomaly, every signal, every distant transmission. Its crew, fewer than a dozen, moved with quiet efficiency, aware that the galaxy considered them insignificant. And yet, they knew their value. Captain Lena Cross stood at the helm, her hands resting lightly on the control interface. Her eyes scanned the vast expanse of stars stretching before her, and she did not flinch as the Triarch Dominion's patrol vessels emerged from warp, cutting across the corridor in a deliberate, confident formation. The Dominion's ships were larger, more numerous, and armed with weapons designed to crush anything smaller than a capital dreadnought. They had come expecting an easy victory. They did not consider the humans capable of meaningful resistance. "They think they have us," Cross murmured, almost to herself. Her voice was calm, even gentle, but it carried the weight of quiet confidence. "Let them see how wrong they are." The first Dominion frigate fired. The energy beam streaked across the void with lethal intent, but the Celestial Dawn did not panic. Its thrusters adjusted subtly, engines humming in precise counterbalance to the incoming assault. On board, the crew's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, activating electromagnetic fields calibrated to disrupt the Dominion's targeting systems without causing harm. In moments, the frigate's weapon systems stuttered, communications flickered, and its navigation array faltered. Another Dominion vessel moved to flank, but the freighter anticipated the maneuver, releasing a counterfield that disrupted engines and immobilized it. Crew communications erupted in static as the ship drifted helplessly, floating in the void, unable to correct its trajectory. The humans had not fired a single shot, yet the Dominion's advantage evaporated entirely. Captain Cross's voice echoed across the Dominion fleet's unsecured communications channel, calm, measured, and unmistakably authoritative. "You assumed we were weak. You assumed patience meant submission. You assumed your history, your firepower, your fleets made us irrelevant. You were wrong. We remember, and we decide when justice is due." The effect on the Dominion was instantaneous. Shock rippled through their ranks. No commander had ever imagined that a single, unassuming freighter could neutralize multiple ships simultaneously, without loss of life, without destruction, using only precision, timing, and calculated interference. The Dominion's pride turned to confusion and then to fear. Across the galaxy, intelligence agencies scrambled to understand what had occurred in the Cathari cluster. Fleets that had ignored human space began to transmit frantic reports, Ships immobilized, patrols disrupted, no casualties, no destruction, just the quiet, inescapable power of patient observation and meticulous preparation. Humanity had been underestimated for centuries. Now, the consequences of that misjudgment were being revealed. Captain Cross did not celebrate. She did not issue triumphant commands or indulge in the fleeting thrill of vindication. Patience had been humanity's strength for generations, and she understood that the moment of action must be precise. Every system, every crew member, every move had been calculated for decades, refined through observation and tempered by restraint. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as a minor inconvenience, a species too small to matter. And yet here they were, demonstrating with quiet, unyielding precision that patience was not weakness, and that those who underestimated humans would find themselves at a cost they could scarcely comprehend. In the council chambers of the Vortali Dominion, messages arrived as coded alerts. One human vessel has neutralized 3 patrol ships simultaneously. No casualties, no weapons fired, all systems functioning, no visible damage. The counselors' mandibles clicked nervously. They had long catalogued humans as weak, as inconsequential. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. From that moment, the galaxy began to realize an uncomfortable truth. Humans were patient, yes, but that patience was not limitless. They could endure decades, centuries, unnoticed, underestimated, even mocked. But when the time came to act, when justice or revenge was due, they did so with precision, intelligence, and inevitability. Captain Lena Cross looked across the void, her eyes calm, her mind steady. Humanity's patience had been tested for centuries, and now the moment of reckoning had arrived. One freighter against the arrogance of empires. One crew against fleets that had considered them irrelevant. Humanity was quiet, small, and patient, and the galaxy was about to learn the true meaning of what patience could become. The stars themselves seemed to shimmer, as if acknowledging the inevitability. Humanity had waited long enough. Humanity had endured. Humanity had remembered. And when the time came, the galaxy would tremble. The calm before the storm was over. The galaxy had expected nothing from humanity. For centuries, humans had been catalogued as minor, inconsequential, and weak. Entire empires had dismissed their fleets as trifles, their colonies as insignificant, their technology as primitive. But in the cold void of the Cathari cluster, those assumptions were about to unravel with quiet precision. The Resolute moved silently in the outer reaches of the cluster, Captain Mara Ellison at the helm. Her crew, trained to endure and observe for years, monitored every transmission, every fleet maneuver, every signal of potential threat. The humans had watched the empires for generations, cataloging errors, noting arrogance, recording patterns, and preparing. Patience had been their weapon. Observation had been their shield. And now, with centuries of endurance behind them, it was time for action. Reports poured into council chambers across the galaxy. Small human freighters immobilizing patrols, disrupting supply convoys, and neutralizing fleets without firing a shot. Each report carried the same note: no casualties, no damage, no chaos, only the terrifying effectiveness of precision and planning. Humanity's patience had yielded a capability that no empire had anticipated. Captain Ellison addressed her crew in the hushed command center of the Resolute. They have been arrogant. They have dismissed us. They believe centuries of domination make them invulnerable. Now they will understand. Every move is deliberate. Every strike is calculated. We do not act recklessly. We do not kill unnecessarily. We demonstrate consequence, and we do so with inevitability. Across the void, the first wave of strategic engagements began. Supply convoys belonging to the Dominion were intercepted. Without a shot fired, engines stalled, communications went dark, and weapon systems malfunctioned. The humans had deployed subtle electromagnetic pulses, carefully tuned to disrupt complex systems without permanent destruction. One Dominion patrol attempted to respond, moving to intercept the Resolute's advance. Its captain, confident in centuries of Imperial superiority, activated the ship's full arsenal. Missiles launched, beams flared, and the Dominion crew anticipated a swift victory. The Resolute, however, moved with near-prescient precision. Navigation adjustments, electronic interference, and subtle maneuvers neutralized every attack. The Dominion vessel drifted helpless, engines stuttering, weapons inert. Captain Ellison transmitted across all unsecured channels, her voice calm but unmistakable. You believed we were insignificant. You believed our patience meant submission. You believed your arrogance, your numbers, your history rendered us irrelevant. You were wrong. Humanity remembers. Humanity waits. Humanity acts when the time is right. The ripple of fear spread. Council chambers convened emergency sessions with Vertali, Andari, and Sarkin leaders watching holo-feeds of immobilized fleets. The arrogance that had long defined their diplomacy and warfare began to crumble. One human vessel had undone formations and strategies that had taken centuries to perfect. The galaxy was witnessing a principle. Patience, observation, and intelligence could surpass brute force, history, and pride. Captain Cross of the Celestial Dawn coordinated with the Resolute from a remote sector. Their synchronized maneuvers demonstrated the terrifying adaptability of human strategy. Patrols that tried to predict their movement found themselves anticipating nothing correctly. Every adjustment the Council made was anticipated, countered, or rendered irrelevant. Humanity's patience had become inevitability, and every empire that had dismissed them now recognized the peril of that misjudgment. Even minor species, long accustomed to watching major empires clash, whispered among themselves in awe and fear. "We underestimated them," said one, voice trembling. "They have waited, and now they are capable of undoing fleets without a shot." Entire fleets rendered helpless by patience alone. The Resolute moved like a ghost through the sector, precise and deliberate. Communications arrays, navigation grids, and energy conduits of Council vessels flickered, disabled by invisible pulses. Supply lines faltered, patrol formations dissolved, and commanders struggled to respond. And yet, no lives were lost, no structures destroyed. The humans were not demonstrating rage. They were demonstrating principle. Captain Ellison addressed the galaxy once more, her voice carrying across multiple frequencies. "You assumed patience was weakness. You assumed silence meant submission. You assumed that dismissing humans carried no consequence. You were wrong. Observe the cost of arrogance, the result of underestimation, and the inevitability of those who have endured, observed, and learned. Across thousands of light years, fleets that had once scorned humanity trembled. Vortali dreadnoughts drifted helplessly. Andari cruisers glimmered impotent in the void. Sarkhan battle squadrons hissed in disbelief. And every empire, Minor and major alike realized that centuries of arrogance, exploitation, and condescension had left them unprepared for the first wave of humanity's deliberate, patient retaliation. The first human strikes were surgical. They neutralized without destroying. They immobilized without annihilation. They demonstrated not fury, but inevitability. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, began to understand humanity had never been weak. They had been waiting. And when the humans decided it was time for justice, the consequences would be absolute. Every empire that had mocked them, dismissed them, and catalogued them as minor would learn the full cost of underestimating patience that had been honed over generations. In the command center of the Resolute, Captain Ellison's eyes swept across the status consoles. The first wave was complete. Every fleet engagement had been anticipated, every maneuver counted, and every target neutralized with precision. Humanity's patience had become an unstoppable force. The galaxy trembled in silence, watching the consequences of centuries-long endurance. And humanity had only just begun. By the time the Resolute reached the central corridors of the Cathari cluster, the galaxy was in chaos, not from destruction, not from explosions, but from the sheer impossibility of what humans were accomplishing. Entire fleets, long considered unstoppable, drifted helplessly in space, their engines sputtering, weapon systems offline, and communications jammed or scrambled. Commanders who had once laughed at humanity's patience now stared at the holofeeds in disbelief, realizing that every move, every countermeasure, every fleet formation they had relied on for centuries had been anticipated and neutralized. Council chambers across the major empires convened emergency sessions. The Vortali Dominion, the Andari High Council, and the Sarkhan Conclave all scrambled to understand what was occurring. Messages poured in. Human freighters and warships were immobilizing fleets, disrupting supply lines, and neutralizing patrols with surgical precision. No casualties, no destruction, yet the effect was devastating. Councillor Threx of the Vortali Dominion slammed his claws against the holo panel. One ship, one vessel has undone formations, patrols, and fleets that the Andari High Chancellor shimmered with fractured light, her crystalline form vibrating with tension. We catalogued them as minor. We assumed patience meant submission. We ignored their signals, dismissed their fleets. And now, one human vessel has demonstrated what no council could foresee. Admiral Vorash of the Sarkhan hissed, his scales rippling with unease. They have learned our tactics, anticipated every maneuver, neutralized our fleets without destruction, without bloodshed. One species, one ship, and they render entire fleets helpless. On board the Resolute, Captain Mara Ellison observed the immobilized fleets with quiet satisfaction. Not triumph, not anger, but calm observation. Every move the humans had made was deliberate, every countermeasure carefully calculated. Humanity had endured centuries of arrogance and exploitation, and now, with patience transformed into action, they were demonstrating a principle that the galaxy had long ignored: underestimate humans at your own peril. Ellison's voice carried across all unsecured frequencies, measured and authoritative. You assumed our silence was weakness. You assumed patience meant submission. You assumed that dismissing humans carried no consequence. You were wrong. Humanity has endured, observed, and learned, and we act when justice or reckoning is due. The first major fleets that had attempted to pursue the Resolute found themselves immobilized before they could engage. Electronic systems faltered in perfect synchronization with the humans' maneuvers. Missiles misfired, energy weapons overloaded, and navigation arrays spiraled into failure. Fleet commanders watched helplessly as their decades of training, their centuries of assumed superiority, dissolved in moments. Even the minor species, long relegated to observing the galaxy's great powers, recognized the magnitude of the situation. We laughed at them. We ignored them. We assumed they were irrelevant, whispered a representative of a minor mining collective. And now one human ship controls fleets 10 times its size. They are patient, yes, but patience has a limit. And when it is reached, they are inevitable. Across multiple sectors, the humans coordinated with quiet precision. Supply lines, previously considered untouchable, were neutralized without conflict. Communication grids were disrupted, leaving commanders in a state of controlled paralysis. Every action sent a message. Humanity does not fight recklessly. Humanity delivers consequences with precision, observation, and inevitability. The Council struggled to respond. Strategies were adjusted, countermeasures deployed, fleets repositioned, but each effort was anticipated, neutralized, or rendered irrelevant. Captain Ellison had studied the galaxy for centuries, cataloging every error, every overconfidence, every arrogance. Now, with decades of preparation converging, humanity demonstrated the terrifying calculus of patience combined with action. Even the Dominion's intelligence networks were helpless. Attempts to predict human maneuvers failed because humans did not act randomly. They acted deliberately. Every engagement, every interference, every immobilization followed patterns so precise that it became clear to every fleet commander that this was not a fluke. This was not luck. This was strategy honed over generations. Captain Cross of the Celestial Dawn monitored multiple sectors simultaneously, coordinating actions with other human vessels. Each engagement was surgical. Fleets were neutralized without destruction, patrols disabled without casualties, and supply chains dismantled without chaos. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as one species dismissed for centuries as irrelevant demonstrated control over situations that should have been impossible. Counselor Threx, his mandibles trembling, spoke again, more to himself than to anyone else. They are not weak, they are not insignificant. One vessel, one species, and entire fleets cannot touch them. Our arrogance, our pride has been our undoing. The Andari High Chancellor's crystalline form vibrated with tension. We dismissed patience as submission. We dismissed endurance as irrelevance. And now we see what patience carries when it is broken. Humanity has endured centuries of oversight, of exploitation, of dismissal, and they are finally acting. The galaxy trembles before one species because they are patient, and they are prepared. As the humans continued their maneuvers, the psychological impact on the galaxy became as significant as the physical disruption. Empires that had relied on sheer firepower now realized that intelligence, patience, and foresight could be more devastating than fleets, weapons, or history. Humanity's first wave of retribution was not a violent storm, but a silent, inevitable wave, reshaping the balance of power without firing a single destructive shot. Captain Ellison stood on the bridge, calm and measured, her gaze fixed on the stars. The galaxy had mocked humanity for centuries, underestimated them for generations, and now they were learning a truth that no fleet, no empire, no council could ignore. Humans were patient. Humans endured. And when they decided that revenge or justice was due, The consequences were absolute. The council and fleets, paralyzed and helpless, watched silently as human ships moved like shadows through the void, striking with precision, correcting with inevitability, and dismantling arrogance without a single unnecessary act of destruction. Humanity had begun to reclaim centuries of humiliation, asserting their intelligence, patience, and inevitability across sectors that had long ignored them. And the galaxy began to understand something no empire had ever truly realized. Humanity was patient, but patience, once it gave way to action, was unstoppable. The galaxy had not seen anything like it before. Across hundreds of light years, fleets that had once ruled entire sectors with unchallenged authority now drifted helpless, their engines sputtering, weapons offline, and command systems scrambled by invisible precision. Humanity's patience had turned into inevitability, and now the Council and every empire that had underestimated them faced a terrifying truth. The humans were not only capable, they were unstoppable when the time to act had come. Captain Mara Ellison stood on the bridge of the Resolute, calm and focused, as her fleet coordinated maneuvers with surgical precision. Communications from immobilized fleets echoed across her screens, desperate and confused, but carefully intercepted and logged. The humans were not interested in destruction for the sake of chaos. They were delivering a principle: underestimate patience at your own peril. The Andari High Chancellor, her crystalline body vibrating with tension, convened an emergency session with every major empire representative. Holo feeds displayed the disabled fleets in real time, a gallery of what the galaxy had assumed was invincible, capital ships frozen mid-formation, dreadnoughts drifting without propulsion, squadrons rendered useless before they could fire a single shot. Councillor Threx of the Vortali Dominion pounded his claws against the council dais, his voice trembling with rage and fear. How can this be? One species, one fleet, and entire empires are immobilized? We catalog them as weak, as inconsequential, as insignificant. And now his words trailed off, replaced by a stunned silence that pervaded the chamber. Even Admiral Vorash of the Sarkhan, whose species prided itself on cunning and manipulation, could not mask his disbelief. They anticipated every maneuver, countered every response, and neutralized our fleets without firing a weapon. One species, one fleet, and they render centuries of strategy irrelevant. How can one vessel accomplish what entire empires cannot? The humans, however, moved with deliberate calm. Every ship in the human formation had been meticulously calibrated for decades of observation. Every countermeasure, every electronic disruption, every subtle interference was the result of patient study, endurance, and precision. Humanity had endured centuries of exploitation, mockery, and underestimation. Now, they were delivering consequences. Captain Ellison transmitted a message across the void, her voice steady and commanding. You assumed our silence was weakness. You assumed patience meant submission. You assumed that dismissing humans carried no consequence. You were wrong. Humanity endures. Humanity observes. Humanity acts when the time for justice is due. And that time is now. The Council scrambled to respond. Fleets attempted evasive maneuvers, to regroup, to retaliate, but each action was anticipated and neutralized. Communications relayed frantic commands, but the humans had already prepared contingencies for every scenario. The galaxy's most formidable powers were discovering the terrifying precision of humanity's patient planning. In the outer reaches of the Sarkhan sector, human vessels moved through fleet formations with ghost-like precision, subtly disabling engines, scrambling targeting systems, and rendering weapons inoperable. Not a single life was lost, yet the effect was catastrophic. Fleets designed to dominate entire systems were rendered helpless, drifting like toys in the void. Commanders who had once prided themselves on cunning now realized that intelligence, foresight, and endurance had eclipsed size, numbers, and arrogance. On board the Resolute, Captain Ellison observed the status panels, noting each immobilized fleet, every neutralized patrol, every disrupted supply line. The humans were delivering justice, not revenge in the emotional sense, but inevitability, a demonstration that centuries of arrogance and underestimation carried consequences the galaxy had ignored at its peril. Minor species, who had long observed the great empires clash and dominate, whispered among themselves in disbelief and awe. We laughed at them. We ignored them. We assumed they were irrelevant. And now one species has rendered fleets 10 times its size helpless. Patience, endurance, it has become inevitability. Even fleets that had not been directly engaged began to tremble. Word spread through subspace faster than any traditional communications could carry. Humans were not reacting impulsively. They were calculating, anticipating, and neutralizing every threat with exacting precision. Every empire, from the largest to the smallest, now understood that their historical dominance was irrelevant in the face of patience turned into action. Captain Cross, coordinating alongside Ellison from the Celestial Dawn, transmitted carefully curated instructions to human detachments scattered across multiple sectors. Every engagement was surgical. Supply chains were disrupted, patrols neutralized, fleets immobilized, and arrogance dismantled without a single unnecessary casualty. Humanity was teaching a lesson, but it was not learned through destruction. It was learned through inevitability. The Vortali Dominion scrambled to respond, but their attempts were predictable, and humanity had already accounted for them. Admiral Vorash's Sarkhan squadrons attempted to intercept human movements, only to find their systems offline, engines unresponsive, and command protocols scrambled. One by one, fleets across the galaxy found themselves helpless before the patient, deliberate force of humanity. Captain Ellison addressed the galaxy one final time in that initial wave of escalation. You assumed that your arrogance, history, and size guaranteed supremacy. You assumed that dismissing humanity carried no risk. You assumed our patience meant submission. And you were wrong. Patience is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And when humanity decides the time for justice is upon you, consequences are absolute. The Council and the Empires could do nothing but watch, paralyzed. Commanders who had spent lifetimes in strategy and warfare realized a terrifying truth. Humans had endured. They had learned, and they had chosen when to act. Humanity's patience had been their weapon, their shield, and now it was the instrument of inevitability. As the first wave of human actions spread across multiple sectors, the galaxy began to understand a principle it had long refused to acknowledge. Humans were patient, and that patience had a limit. When the limit was reached, when action became inevitable, even the largest fleets, the most arrogant empires, and the most confident councils were powerless. The Resolute and its sister vessels glided silently through space, precise, deliberate, and calm. Humanity had transformed centuries of observation and endurance into a single overwhelming truth. Underestimate humans at your own peril. The galaxy trembled, fleets immobilized, councils paralyzed, and minor species in awe, all bearing witness to a species that had been dismissed for centuries, now demonstrating the devastating power of patience honed into action. And humanity was only beginning. By the time the human fleet reached the edge of the Cathari Rift, the galaxy was in stunned silence. Fleets that had once ruled entire sectors now drifted helplessly in space, their engines sputtering, weapon systems offline, and command networks scrambled. The great empires that had scorned humanity for centuries, Vorthali, Andari, Sarkhan, and countless minor powers were powerless to respond. Captain Mara Ellison stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her hands resting lightly on the control interface. Her gaze swept across the immobilized fleets, each vessel a testament to the arrogance and misjudgment of centuries. The human crews, calm and methodical, coordinated the final stages of the operation. No lives were lost. No worlds were destroyed. This was not chaos. This was inevitability. From the bridge, Ellison transmitted across all accessible frequencies. Her voice, steady and resolute, carried a weight that silenced frantic chatter across fleets and councils alike. You assumed our silence was weakness. You assumed patience meant submission. You assumed that dismissing humanity carried no consequence. You were wrong. Humanity endures. Humanity observes. Humanity acts when the time for justice or reckoning is due, and that time is now. Across the galaxy, holofeeds displayed fleets frozen mid-maneuver, engines failing, communications scrambled, weapons inert. Admirals and counselors stared, mouths agape, claws trembling, mandibles clicking in disbelief. A species they had catalogued as minor, insignificant, irrelevant, had demonstrated control over fleets 10 times their size. Humanity's patience had evolved into absolute authority. Counselor Thrax of the Vortali Dominion pounded the dais, desperation etched in every movement. It cannot be. One species, one fleet, and entire empires are immobilized. We cataloged them as weak. We underestimated them. How can this be? His voice, usually commanding, now trembled with fear. The Andari High Chancellor shimmered with fractured light, her crystalline form quivering. We dismissed endurance as irrelevance. We laughed at their patience. And now we see the consequence. One species has taken control of fleets that we believed unstoppable. Humanity has chosen the moment to act, and we are powerless to stop them. Even minor species, long relegated to observing the galaxy's great powers, whispered in awe. They waited, and now they decide, said a representative from a mining coalition. One species, centuries of observation, and they deliver inevitability. We cannot touch them. We can only watch. The human fleet moved with silent precision. Every ship, from the largest frigate to the smallest scout, executed maneuvers that disabled fleets without destruction. Supply chains collapsed, patrols were neutralized, and fleets that had dominated sectors for centuries drifted helplessly in space. The humans had orchestrated a network of action so precise that no empire could predict or counter it. On board the Celestial Dawn, Captain Lena Cross coordinated the final engagements. Ensure the Vortali fleets are stabilized but remain immobilized. she instructed, her voice calm. No unnecessary damage. This is not vengeance. It is inevitability. They will understand the cost of arrogance and the power of patience. Across the galaxy, communication networks relayed her message verbatim. Human transmissions flooded sensors. Every fleet, every station, every command network receiving the same principle: underestimate patience at your own peril. Humanity had endured centuries of exploitation, mockery, and dismissal. Now they were teaching the galaxy a lesson it could not ignore. Fleet commanders attempted desperate maneuvers. Patrols scrambled. Dreadnoughts fired weapons, and admirals issued commands in panicked coordination. Every move was anticipated. Every countermeasure had already been neutralized. Humanity's patience, long considered weakness, had been refined into an instrument of inevitability. Captain Ellison addressed the galaxy one final time. You assumed our silence was weakness. You assumed our patience meant submission. You assumed that dismissing humans carried no cost. We remind you now, patience is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And when humanity decides the time for justice is due, the consequences are absolute. Humanity endures. Humanity observes, and humanity acts when the moment is right. You have underestimated us for centuries. That era is over. In council, chambers, across multiple empires, holo feeds continued to relay the images: immobilized fleets, disrupted supply lines, powerless admirals. Counselor Threx's claws shook uncontrollably. Admiral Vorash hissed in disbelief, his pride shattered. The Andari High Chancellor's crystal form vibrated, reflecting the fear and awe of a species learning that intelligence, observation, and patience could surpass centuries of assumed superiority. Minor species watched silently, recording every transmission. They understood the principle now, a universal truth they could not ignore. Humans wait, they endure. And when the moment comes, their patience becomes action, decisive, inevitable, and unstoppable. In the void, the human fleet coalesced, its formation deliberate, precise, and calm. The galaxy had learned a lesson it could never forget. Humanity's patience had been the armor that shielded them from centuries of dismissal. Humanity's observation had been the map that allowed them to anticipate every mistake and arrogance. And now, humanity's action had become the reckoning that even the most powerful fleets could not resist. Captain Cross transmitted the final directive to all human vessels: hold position. Maintain readiness. The galaxy has seen what patience brings. Let them understand that underestimating humanity is no longer an option. We act not with chaos, but with inevitability. We act not with rage, but with principle. And the galaxy will remember this day forever. The stars seemed to shimmer as if acknowledging the shift. Fleets remained immobilized, councils paralyzed, and minor species silent with awe. Humanity had waited long enough. Humanity had endured enough. Humanity had remembered, and the galaxy trembled. The patience of humanity had never been weakness. It had been inevitability. And now, the galaxy would never underestimate them again.